Canavan. But first, don't tell me the culture wars don't count. We have just learned that Australia's academic historians are not interested in the truth, not interested in free speech, which to me explains why so many damaging lies are told in our universities and schools about our supposedly genocidal past. Now, when I say our academic historians, they aren't interested in the truth of the debate, I'm going by the Australian Historical Association, which has just censored a man who has been a guest many times on this show. Censored him, banned him, suspended him, cancelled his appearance yesterday at the association's annual conference in Sydney, and done that with less than a day's notice. That man is Roger Karge, who's a truth-teller, the head of the website Dark Emu Exposed, where he and his researchers and professional genealogists have done truly astonishing work, as I've told you a number of times. And that turns out to be what's horrified this Australian Historical Association, which is led by a group of academics, many of them professors. For instance, Dark Emu Exposed has done genealogical research, which exposed that Professor Bruce Pascoe, author of the bestseller Dark Emu, exposed that he, just as I had warned, was not actually Aboriginal, not what he claimed. In fact, he is not one known Aboriginal ancestor. Karge and his team also joined me and others, including belatedly academic anthropologists, in proving Pascoe's book peddled a junk theory. Now, Pascoe actually claimed Aborigines weren't originally hunter-gatherers, but farmers living in houses, in towns of up to 1,000 people, towns of which magically not one trace remains. But Pascoe and his trash book were nevertheless promoted by the ABC and in schools as the gospel truth, while historians stayed mute or even praised Pascoe. But, Roger Karge and his team helped expose the fakery. But more than that, Karge and his genealogists also found an astonishing number of university academics who claimed to be Aboriginal, some even doing jobs meant for Aborigines, but who did not have a single Aboriginal ancestor in their available genealogical record. Nor would any of these people, who I'll now show, respond to requests by Roger Karge and me to prove they were indeed Aboriginal, to show somehow that we'd made a mistake.
I said to the guy, oh yeah, I'm Aboriginal. That's what my mum and my nan have told us. And he told me, well, no, you can't tick that box. He says, because you're not, you're too white.
We've got this Aboriginal, the denial of our right to be recognised on our own land.
The real world is not a safe place for Indigenous people.
Aboriginal Australians not only invented bread, they also invented society.
So I'm speaking to you today from Didnt country, which is just borders on my mother's country. But I want to welcome you by singing a song that Pemulwuy wrote. Next slide, so that you can sing this song of welcome wherever you go. I'm just going to tune up my clapsticks. I'm from
the Gamaragal, and as I've said, the Gamaragal are the people from this country, and this is our traditional land.
I'm Ngarigu. I'm from the Snowy Mountains in southeastern Australia. That's my mob.
Now, that last person you just heard there is Jacqueline Troy. She's been a welcome speaker at 2 conferences so far of this same Australian Historical Association. She's welcome because she fits its gender agenda and its race and anti-colonial agenda too. And, that kind of stuff gives you a pass, especially when you are a so-called Aborigine. To preach things like Troy's work on a supposed Aboriginal periodic table, saying Indigenous people understand chemistry as something that is deeply connected to us as people. I think that's at the core of Indigenous science. Right on, tribal Aborigines, they had that chemistry worked out, the hydrogen, the nitrogen, the uranium. So not surprising then that Troy is one of many academics who've been horrified when Roger Karge comes in with his team to do a fact check on them. And Troy responded with vile and false smears like these recorded in one of her lectures.
There are 40 Nazis who started a blog called Dark EU Exposed. Their mission is to exterminate Aboriginal people. And they have said if they can't destroy us by destroying our reputations, they will, we should be shot.
Seriously, should be shot. Karge is saying that, right? Are you kidding? Troy and the university have since apologised for that defamation, admitted it is false after they were threatened with legal action. But that tells you something about professional historians and academics, and now this Australian Historical Association has confirmed it. It had invited to its conference, not just Karge, of course, but a bunch of others, including an historian whose work Karge had also fact-checked, Stephen Gapps, who promotes a myth, also popular in universities, that Aborigines and colonists fought real wars here, that Aborigines fought as guerrillas in wars of resistance. They were really more like freedom fighters, not just raiders. Karge argued, that the evidence in fact showed that this is an exaggeration, a highly political one, and of course, as you know, it's being used to demonise British settlement here. Well, this Stephen Gapps, who saw Karge listed as a speaker, made a big stink about it. He said, I do not want to be presenting at the same conference as the editor of the Dark Emu Exposed website, at which I would have said, had I been the organiser, well, see you later then, Petal, we believe in debate. But others also complained. You had Aboriginal activist and academic Marsha Langton. She joined in, went to town in her usual way. Anonymous clowns, they also posted abuse of Aboriginal academics still going to the conference and legitimising it with Karge there. And the result is the association caved. Its secretary, a professor from the University of New England, sent Karge an email on Sunday night telling him he was disinvited, telling him not to come the next day because, having viewed the contents of the website Dark Emu Exposed, the AHA executive has made a decision to suspend your membership while it investigates the claim of conduct unbecoming a member or prejudicial to the interests of the association, whatever that means. Because, go to the website yourself, look up Dark Emu Exposed, one word, darkemuexposed.org. And you tell me what on there is a crime against the truth or a crime against history or whatever. What is the Australian Historical Association actually trying to cover up here? What debate, what truth does it want stifled? I'd have to say it's no wonder at all that so few university students now study history in our universities. You get, history departments being closed. No wonder so few of the history bestsellers these days in the bookshops are actually written by academic historians. No surprise, because you see academics running so fast and so far from a teller of truths, even of hard truths, which makes me certainly not the only one who then doesn't trust what they preach, and worse, what they teach our children. I was joined earlier by Roger Karge. Roger Karge, thank you so much for your time. What specific reason were you given for being banned?
Well, in the email, they told me that I had acted as a unbecoming member of the association, and I was bringing the association into disrepute, right? Or had been alleged that was happening. That was what I was doing.
How would you have done that?
Well, I don't know. So they've suspended me for 2 weeks, and they're saying a review process is on. And so what happened is I didn't initially respond to their email. So Richard Scully, I think from the association, rang up to make sure I had the email, and I think to make sure I wasn't going to come in and do my presentation. And I spoke to him on the phone, and I said, well, this is all allegations and it's not true. And he goes, well, you'll be given adequate time and the ability to put your case, but in the meantime, you're suspended for 2 weeks.
So guilty until proven innocent. All right. Now, I have narrowed it down to Maybe it's because you exposed people claim to be Aboriginal when the genealogical records suggest they're not, including people who've been honoured or valorised by the Historical Association, or it's because you fact-checked one of the guys that stacked on a turn that you were there, Stephen Gapps. What beef might that historian have with you that he refused to speak at this conference if you were there?
Well, it's very surprising because I know Stephen Gapps' work. I've bought all his books. I studied them. He's a very good historian. He goes into the records, gets all the evidence, and most of it's right. But my critique is he gets the evidence, but then he spins it. So he's what we call a frontier war theorist. He believes Australia wasn't settled relatively peacefully compared to the rest of the world. It was actually a war, right? So these people, they say the frontier war was very bloody. Australia was an invasion. Aboriginal people were killed and massacred. And we say, look, there was a lot of violence on the frontier, but it's not actually a war. It's not a formal war. Aboriginal people were British subjects. And we're British subjects. Our ancestors were settlers were British subjects. And you can't have a war against your own citizens. So I've critiqued that. I've said, look, and I've got Stephen's own figures. I think he studied the whole of the Sydney area for the first, 30 years, 20 years. And I think he said there were 130 Aboriginal people that were killed in violent clashes with settlers. Now, that's 130 people. It's regrettable, but that's over 30 years. That's not a war. So we say, look, you're extending the evidence. You're trying to make it look like there was a war, and there was not. There was a lot of conflict, a lot of fighting. A lot of Aboriginal people came into the settlement. They didn't want to fight. So it's a much more complicated, nuanced story. And because I'm putting that forward, and I'm going to publish a book soon on it soon, the Frontier Wars, Myth or Reality, and that goes against the zeitgeist or the narrative that people like Stephen Gapps are putting forward. So it's a bit poor. It's not very academic just to walk out of the room because I'm there to critique that.
Yeah, but the Australian Historical Association is a dog in this fight, as you know. I mean, they paid a loving tribute to Professor Linda Ryan, who was one of the people who started this idea that there was a war, a genocide, quite deliberate, etc., etc. And her work was criticised by Keith Winshuttle in The Fabrication of Aboriginal History, Volume 1 in particular. And that really has horrified the professional historians. And now here you come along, stomping around, saying, "Look, the evidence is there that it was not a a war." Is that really, do you think, your offence here?
It is in a way, but I totally often disagree with Linda Ryan, right? So we used to argue in the Australian newspapers, a couple of arguments that she published her critique and the people that work for me published ours. She emailed me 2 or 3 times, so you could actually dialogue with someone like Linda Ryan because she's old school. Right, so she didn't agree with me and she said a lot of my work was ridiculous, but at least she interacted with me. Whereas the younger ones, I don't know if I call Stephen Gapps this term, but is he a snowflake? He won't even engage with us. In the end, he sort of says, well, if Roger's going to be at the conference, I'm going to go home to mummy. I don't want to be there, which is not right. He should be attacking my research and saying, look, Roger, you're wrong because of this, you're wrong because of that. And that's the bigger problem. It's not so much that the frontier war theories, theorists, they're arguing with us, but at least in the old days they argued with Keith Winshuttle. They argued with him a lot. But the big worry is now for free speech, there's no argument anymore. These people just cancel you. They don't even want to go there, which means you're going to end up, society will end up with the wrong answers because there's no free speech. You can't debate.
Yeah, well, for him to have such tender feelings that he can't even be in the same room as you is one thing. What I find disgusting is that the Australian Historical Association, which is run by academics, they are so allergic to this that they have banned you. Now, they've got a bit of a history in that. When I mentioned Keith Winshuttle, when he, proved that Linda Ryan had made pretty serious mistakes in her book, they actually spent a whole day workshopping how to get back at Keith Winshuttle, and now they've cancelled you. So what does that tell you about this association and the academics that it represents?
Well, it's not to be really trusted. It's not. It's a sad indictment on their whole methodology, because they realised that perhaps they couldn't beat Keith Windschuttle by debating him, so they're not going to try that anymore. So when people like I come along, they don't even try. They just cancel us, right? So it's like the Soviet Union. So I noticed someone sent me today, I was on the program 2 days ago, but if you go to the program today, my name's been blacked out. It's like Stalin with his photographs. They just sort of airbrush you out and I'm gone, right? So, and they think, oh, hopefully no one will notice. So it's appalling, you know. It's what are we? And the thing is, my understanding is the conference is paid for by the Australian Defence Force, the Army. They're sponsoring it. So why is the Army sponsoring this instead of spending their money on drones and bullets? What's going on in this country? And that's what we're trying to get publicity for. There is something seriously wrong with these people and these organisations.
Roger Karge, thank you so much for your time.
All right. Thank you, Andrew.
And what this conference has missed out is Roger's paper, which says originally, historians are saying that at Risdon Cove, Tasmania, 1802, terrible massacre, 50 people maybe murdered, Aborigines murdered, because a convict said so. I was a witness, eyewitness, he says, in something like 26 years after the event. I was a witness. Except Roger's gone back and found out this eyewitness didn't arrive in the colony until 2 years later, and the true death toll is more like 2 or 3, which is regrettable. But it's not a massacre. After the break, I hope he'll put that on his website, darkemuexposed.org.